Hey guys, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Jeneth Blackert. I'm the founder of the Real Raw You Synergy podcast, and today's guest is Matt Corker. Now, I have met Matt over the interwebs, and I just fell in love with his persona online and then started diving in, like I do with most guests, into his work. And he works in a few different industries. He does yoga in the corporate industry. He works with Lululemon, and he also has made this very unique deck of cards that is called InQuest, which is an inquiry into finding out who you really are. So I thought he would be a great fit for the Real Raw You Synergy podcast. So hello and welcome, and please welcome Matt. Matt, welcome to the call.
Jenna, thanks so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. And one thing I should mention is, in a past life, or 5.5 years ago, is when I started working at Lululemon, and have since, my sister has started a HR consultancy company that I now proudly am a part of. So while I don't work for Lululemon right now, we're home based in Vancouver, and everywhere and anywhere you go, we see our friends at Lululemon, and we love the chapel of black stretchy pants.
Definitely. Yeah, gosh, I love their clothes. Well, so I just wanted to start this conversation. I know that you have a deep story within about really, coming out as who you are, at not just being gay, but really coming out and being all of you in so many ways by seeking within. So could you just share, let's just start there with a little nugget about how you really started to go, you know what, I'm okay. I'm okay as I am, and I am going to be me instead of trying to fit in with this crowd or that crowd or what have you.
Man, I wish I was at such a rooted place like that you describe. And what I would say is that my journey really started when I was super young. When I was pre-10, I remember sitting up in my bed late at night with Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. And I would highlight it and dog ear the corners of the pages. And it was the book that I absolutely loved. And I was fascinated by this whole way of developing yourself. And I thought this was normal, but clearly I wasn't reading like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. Like I was reading.
Oh no, you just stopped. There we go.
Oh,
it's okay. Just keep going.
Okay. And so I thought it was normal to be interested in spiritual development, to be interested in developing yourself as a leader. And as I went through high school, I started running and organizing leadership conferences for other high school students. And this was just like my path that I felt like I've always been on. And throughout, when I got to university and I moved out I was living in Toronto, or just north of Toronto, and I moved to Vancouver, BC, I noticed that there was like more of myself to uncover and more of myself to be honest with. I came out as a gay man, and that was a really interesting time only because it wasn't as accepting as it is today. We still didn't have role models and celebrities and TV show characters that we could point to say, look at how successful and normal and welcomed and healthy they are. And so with that, it then proceeded to, I took roles in the corporate world where I felt like I needed to put on the suit and act a certain way and be a certain person. And what I realized was I actually loved the environments. Like I loved being in front of a whiteboard. I love having a Sharpie and a flip chart paper behind me. Like those are settings that I feel really, really powerful and comfortable in. Yet who I was coming from a place of, I need to prove that I'm good enough. Mm-hmm. I need to prove that you won't write me off if you know that I'm gay. You won't write me off if you know that I'm young. Right. You won't write me off for any of these reasons. Mm-hmm. And so that was a process for me where I really got to see how much effort I was putting into protecting myself or my identity, trying to impress others, and the toll it took primarily on my friendships. And it was, I'll never forget this. My best friend, Andrew, he sat me down one day and he said, I know who Corker is, but I don't know who Matt is. Because my nickname all growing up and forever, everyone would just call me Corker by my last name. And he's like, I know Corker. Like, I know the personality, I know the name, but I don't know who you are. And so that really sunk with me to be like, okay, the cost of all this work, all this effort to hide, to prove to others that I was good enough, it was costing me my friendships. And so that was the moment when I was like, okay, it's now time to start practicing being courageous. And I say start practicing being courageous because just this last weekend, I was in Boston with my husband and my sister. They were running the Boston Marathon.
Oh, wow.
And they're like superhumans, and I love them so much, and I love being able to be on the sidelines and cheer them on. And, you know, as a non-American, and is with people who are different, going to the States is a little nerve-wracking for me. I mean, it didn't used to be. And so I was sitting on the plane, and this guy sat down beside me, and my husband had gone up and gone to the washroom. And he's like, oh, hopefully no one sits in this seat beside you. I was like, well, actually, hopefully they come back. And they're like, oh, are you traveling with someone? I said, yes. I'm like, oh, is it your girlfriend? And I'm like, this is a big, like, white American man. I was like, okay, this is a moment where I could easily be like, oh, a friend. Or like, here's something, like, let's just diffuse the conversation in a way that feels safe. Everyone walks away unscathed. I'm going to be sitting beside you for the next 3 hours. How do we make this as like pleasant for everyone as possible? And then the practice for me is like, how do I be courageous in this moment to actually stand in my truth, to know what's real and true for me, but also to acknowledge that, like, my husband's one of the most important people in my life. I don't want him to be a friend. I want him to be known as my husband.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, I could see, you know, even I started my blog like 6 years ago, and I started it on the term raw because I was doing this raw vegan thing, which was crazy. And I was just so excited about it and how I felt, and it lit me up, and this, that, and the other. And then I got really sick doing raw. And I couldn't do it anymore. And in fact, I found that, you know, being my type, and well, and the long story short is I now eat and drink whatever I want. And I do, you know, do this Pilates and yoga. And in one of the classes, you know how you usually grab your water bottle and go into class? Well, I grabbed a Diet Coke. And I tell you, I wanted to freaking crawl under a mat and hide, because I was just like, oh my gosh. And then, you know what? I did the same, you know, it was like it happens, and just, you think that you're like totally vulnerable and open, but then you do something and you're like, yep, I do drink Diet Coke. Sorry, guys. You know, it's like, it felt like I was going to be banished from the whole community.
Like the lightning was going to come through the ceiling and like you'll combust on your mat.
Weird, you know, and it's so funny because I even justified it like, well, you know, the occasional splurge. I'm like, well, you know what? I don't even need to justify or prove myself or anything to anyone. Why am I doing this over like a soda? You know, so you've got these like big things that you're like, wait, I'm trying to shrink or like fit in or manipulate it so that it fits into their reality. When by standing in our own and what we are, we can allow other people to do the same.
Well, and even in the example is what I recognize is how often I make an assumption about other people's reactions without giving them the chance to actually respond or react.
You don't even know their point of view. We're just assuming their points of view. I'm assuming an entire yoga class's point of view.
Meanwhile, like there's probably some people in that room that were like, oh my gosh, I wish I had my Diet Coke.
Like,
like, oh, she's so strong to be able to bring in her Diet Coke.
Right.
And, you know, I made the assumption.
There's others that'll judge it.
Totally. Yeah.
It was just such a moment, a recent moment for me. And I thought, you know what, I'm tired of doing this. Just like, you know, I could see how it's quite harder when it's your entire identity, right? So you're always trying to just kind of manipulate and fit in.
Yeah.
So what are some of your tools on being courageous in that way?
The moment to pause and breathe is something that has really shifted how I show up in conflicts, in inner conflicts when I need to step up and be courageous. And that moment to just step back and be like, okay, take a deep breath and go for it. It's like, before I dive into the ocean, I need to hold my breath. So if like I'm going deep, then this means like take a big gust of air in and let's go deep. Yeah. The second one I would say was really being able to, how do I put this into words? Was really recognizing that I need to live the work that I teach.
Yes.
And so if I'm out there promoting a certain level of leadership in this world and working with organizations and managers and talking to them about how to build and lead better businesses, then I need to also be in that work. And for me, when I like to relate it back to coming out, like I didn't have the role model that I saw on TV or in my community of a loving relationship, of someone who is invested and successful in like my version of success. And so anytime I feel like, oh, I want to shrink or I want to do it, I actually think of like a little kid and I'm like, that little kid needs me to be courageous right now.
Right.
And they may not even be present, but one day this story may get shared with the next generation. And I want to be on the side of history that I'm proud of. And, so that perspective kind of gives me that like, okay, do it for the kid, like be the role model you wish you had, essentially. Right.
Yeah. Well, and if everyone would just totally be able to embrace this world, we could be that way. We wouldn't be trying to fit into other people's realities, and we would be able to just stand in our own.
And I think like it's not lost on me that I also have a very privileged ability to be courageous. You know, I'm in the Western world with white skin and I'm male. Like there are a lot of privileges and advantages of that. And so for me to be courageous actually takes a lot less energy than other people. And, you know, and so I feel like there's very few situations where I feel like my life or my job or my safety are at risk. And I think it would be just a different conversation if we looked at it from that lens as well and asked like different tools.
Yeah, this age and time too. I mean, if it was 100 years ago, it would be, I mean, you couldn't be you in a way. I mean, you
totally.
Could, but you might be banished.
Yeah, not necessarily like the life that I love living today.
Right, exactly. Well, I wanted to talk with you about this InQuest deck, of how that came about. I shared with you before our call that I do a program called Quest, and it's literally about following the energy in every single way. We follow the energy. We ask questions to clear up energies, and we also just kind of quest through our life by following question. And
Mm.
I got super curious about it, and it's a beautiful deck. It's kind of like a tarot deck or something like that, but when I was looking at it, it looked very different. So I want to know more.
Yeah, so the birth or the background of the InQuest deck was as someone who has been coaching people for a while. One of my mentors, Suzanne Conrad, she would always have little decks of cards with the leadership principles on it. And so over the years and through the trainings, I've collected all these little decks that as I would be working with someone one-on-one, I would have these cards in front of me as a point of reference to say what leadership principle is needed right now. What am I listening for in this? And so the use of cards in my coaching is a very familiar piece for me. And then I also realized that I got really curious about a form of yoga called Katona yoga. It was created by a woman named Naveen out in New York, and it looked at the body as a house rather than the body as a temple. It used Taoist philosophies and traditional Chinese medicine and things that I've been deeply interested in learning and studying over the years in a really practical language. And so taking this leadership development aspect mixed with yoga and philosophy, I really want to make sure it was accessible for people that may not know any of that. Mm-hmm. And use it in language that if someone off the street picked up a card, they could get something out of it without needing to know. I think tarot does a really beautiful job and those type of decks and angel decks, but there is a learning element that comes into play of like, what does the Three of Swords mean? And so I wanted to create a more accessible access point if someone wanted to go down the route of learning more about the whole lineage of card and card work. So that was where it came from. And it actually was my friend Jess and I were sitting at a coffee shop, and they had little spirit animal cards. And I was like, they always leave me wanting something. And Jess looked at me and goes, you should just create your own deck then. And so I walked home, and it was a beautiful day in Vancouver, and I was walking by the ocean, and I was just like, you know what, tonight's the night that I'll just take a stab at, like, what would this deck look like? And lit some candles, my husband was out for the night working, and just sat on my couch looking out in the world and was like, okay, here are the things that I would want people to be curious about. And 54 things later, half of the magic number 108, I had the deck, and it was on the back of cut up postcards was its first iteration. And it had all of the elements that I wanted to include in it. And it incorporated all the different philosophies from multiple different lineages to be able to give people an access point to like get curious about what could I want more in my life? What could I reflect more, and give people a prompt to start an inner dialogue with themselves. So we call it InQuest because we want people to go on an inner quest.
Yeah. I love it. It's kind of funny because I do this where I just follow the energy and I ask these like really weird, different questions, right? And so and people are like, nobody has ever asked me a question like that. And I think that like going way outside of what they would ever think a question would be allows the universe or consciousness to contribute in that ask and receive response. So I've always thought cards from various decks were so powerful because they would always like, no matter what, they would invite in the curiosity or the question that would open the door for the universe to change it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the beautiful thing for me is through this lens of leadership development is this notion of choice of like, I get to choose what I make things mean. Yes. I get to choose my response and how I interpret things. And so the important thing for me about the InQuest deck was that it wasn't a fortune-telling deck. It wasn't, while there's a lot of spiritual elements, it's not like a divine message necessarily, but it is a prompt for us to listen inwardly. And some people could say to listen to their highest self, to listen to the God within, to listen to their true nature, whatever it is, but to listen for that response. And so I love it's like, follow the energy, ask weird questions, because they do give us new insights.
And it frees us. It knocks open, things that we never thought would open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I've seen it's used in, we recommend pulling 5 different cards each time you would use it. And then some people have started just pulling 1 card every morning. And that would be like their journaling prompt. If they had a personal meditation or journaling practice, they would use it in their morning routine. Other people use it for conversation around the dinner table. One of my friends has it on his coffee table, and anytime he has friends over for like a glass of wine after work, they pull a card and they talk about it. And he sends me photos of it. And I'm like, this is why I wanted to create it, was to give people an access for really, truly meaningful conversations, whether it be with yourself or with people that you love and trust.
Yeah, I could see you doing events or something around that, where people would, like, what are we going to talk about? Conversation starters and things like that.
Totally. So it's like, it could be this like divine and sacred experience, or it could be like the prompt to your next dinner party.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of now see it all as one.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you shut down, and you won't be vulnerable with it, right? Like it catches you to change something, and you put your facade on. But I kind of look at it all as the same now. It doesn't have to be divine or sacred, as long as it just brings something up to change somewhere where you're resisting or reacting, or even aligning with another person's point of view.
Mm-hmm. And Priya Parker is an incredible author who wrote The Art of Gathering. And she's really shifted my perspective on how we bring people together. And part of that shift was realizing and the dinner party is sacred. Bringing in, especially in today's day and age where we connect so frequently digitally, like we're doing now, where we can create relationship and create camaraderie. But there's something about being in the flesh, sitting shoulder to shoulder with someone, whether that be going to see a movie, or going to someone's house for dinner, or maybe it's at a live concert, or maybe it's in like a therapy session. Like, all of these gatherings become sacred.
Yeah, well, every time that you interact with somebody else, you then can perceive and kind of know their energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that, every time that I meet somebody new, whether it's on a conversation like this, or if it's in the real world, like this isn't the real world.
No, this fake world we're living in.
But yeah, you get to, change something, or it will often bring something up for you to look at it and change it if you wish. So I love that. I have often played with decks, and when I saw yours, and I thought, well, I should maybe make one for Quest. And then I was like, maybe we'll use his for our Quest events. And then when I was like, I just need to talk to this guy, because so do you, can you give us an example of one of the prompts, or do you not?
Yeah. So one of my favorite ones, the one that I pulled today actually, is a winter card, and it is self-preservation. And it has a picture on the front of a clam with a pearl inside. And you would think self-preservation is like, how do I shut my shell to preserve, right? Yet the take that I believe in self-preservation is like the clam, it teaches us a lot about, the oyster teaches us a lot about how to turn a grain of sand into something beautiful over time. Right. And it is this notion that the irritants that are bugging us, the irritant of a relationship, an unfinished conversation, that report that I've just been procrastinating doing, whatever it is, that irritant actually becomes a pearl. And it's time to transform that irritant, because there's some lesson, there's some goodness around that. And as soon as it's transformed, it's no longer an irritant, it's a pearl. Like, it's no longer a grain of sand, it's a pearl. And so the question for today around self-preservation. So in order to preserve myself, what irritant is it now time to transform?
Beautiful. What irritant are you coming up with?
Oh my gosh. I think the irritant that I was thinking about this morning was like the notion of like doing it all. And so my irritant is really around my to-do list, and not necessarily the things on my to-do list, but like a to-do list itself has been an irritant. Because I love a good list. I want to feel accomplished. I want to check mark beside things. I want to cross it off. Like, I could like wax on about how much I love a to-do list.
Right.
And at the same time is when I wake up and start a list, all of a sudden there's this, not necessarily anxiety, but there's this like sense of urgency around, okay, I gotta get to it. I gotta get stuff done.
Right.
And in today is Good Friday. It's a holiday here in Vancouver. And I started a list and I'm like, all right, holiday, let's go. Let's be productive. And my husband's like in his sweatpants in the kitchen being like, what do we have to do? It's a holiday.
Right.
And he's like, right. So there's like something for me to learn in how I handle to-do lists.
That putting that pressure on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's sort of funny because I do productivity work as well, and I'm, it's really about being in each moment with each of those tasks, like that level of presence. Yet, we so get wrapped up and got to get it done. Yeah, that we can't be present in the actions of doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. If I was going to be super bold, Jeneth, what's your irritant that you're looking to transform?
Yeah, well,
time to transform.
Let's see. Because I haven't thought about it. You see, you had time to.
I know. This is so mean. It's so mean. I'm putting you on the spot.
Gosh, last night we do this thing in Access Consciousness called bars. So we did this bars exchange. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's like 32 points on the head, and it simply just clears your brain and erases everything. It like drops the noise and the pressure, and I'm really into dropping the noise and pressure everywhere I can. I've even created a course on it. And yet last night, my husband sleeps and he snores. So I was all chilled out and all spacious, and I fell asleep like as soon as my head hit the pillow. And then, I hear this like rumbling, this earth shaking snore. And I wake up, and I tell you, it took me probably another 2 hours to like really get back to sleep without just laying there, waking up. And one of the questions we ask in Access is, what's right about this that I'm not getting? So I don't know, what, I know it irritates me. I'm not really sure what to change, right? So maybe this is the inquiry to ask, what energy can I be in this, like, being woken from this like deep, spacious sleep.
Yeah. And I think the beautiful thing is there's this, with the oyster especially, is it's transformed over time. Like cakes are baked over time. You don't just like open the oven, put in batter, and then open the oven again and like a cake. Like it takes time for chemical reactions and transformation to occur. And it also takes split seconds in other instances. There's explosions that happen to transform things. So sometimes there's a slow burn and sometimes it's instantaneous. And that's what I love about this.
But it's always the awareness that starts it all.
Totally.
Yeah. So, so maybe next time, instead of me actually being aggravated and irritated by it, I can be like, okay, so how can I be more of the clam, and how can this be more the pearl, being created within me, so that I can be Zen no matter what.
Well, what I learned, I'm the snorer. Like I'm the one who shakes the bed. So
I do some of that too. It depends on the night. So I don't have any reason to complain.
And I'm like, man, but I deeply care about sleep. And I care about my husband's sleep quality as well. Yeah. And so for me, I've always slept on my back with like my arms above my head. And it is just like, that is when the lawnmower is at the worst.
That's funny.
And so I was like, I need to learn how to feel comfortable sleeping in a different way that doesn't trigger the lawnmower to be as loud.
Uh-huh.
And so it also like allowed me to be like, okay, like I am also an irritant. Right. So where am I being an irritant, and how can I transform my way of being as well? So sometimes it's like an external irritant. Yeah. Sometimes it's a personal.
Yeah, well, and that's where you get to, I hate that analogy mirror, because I don't really think that we're the exact mirror, but that is sort of one of those places where you get to see, it's that mirroring back. I'm the irritant just as much as he is. I don't blame him. And the last thing I want to do is wake him up either, though I will do a little, things to kind of see if I can alter it.
Oh man, my husband.
Don't tell him that.
What's so funny is I remember when my husband and I first started dating, he would like lightly rub my shoulder, like tap, be like, "Hey, you're snoring," and it was super kind. And now it's just like palm to the face, like roll over, like just stop. Right. I'm like, I get it. You've had 5.5 years of this. Like, I get it.
Yeah, but see how deep we got just on that one card.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
And so it's beautiful there's 4 different suits: fire, which, or I'll start in order. There's wood for the season of spring. There's fire for the season of summer. There's earth for the transitional season of late summer, early fall. There's metal for the season of autumn, and water for the season of winter. And 4 direction cards: north, east, south, and west. Mm-hmm. And it's so exciting for me to be able to pull a card that either is totally related to what's going on in the world, in nature, and sometimes totally opposite. Like right now, we're probably in springtime here in Vancouver, and pulling a winter card, I'm like, oh, what do I need to know, like, about winter? What happened last season? Like, is that the access point of where the irritant is? And, there's a lot of different access points for people to get curious about.
Yeah.
And my dear friend Nadine Nevitt, I just need to shout her out because she's the one who actually illustrated the entire deck. And we thought when we got together, we're like, oh, this is going to be a 3-week project. It'll be super quick. We know exactly what we're looking for. And 2 years later, we finally were able to, have it on shelves for people.
Neat. Well, we are going to leave a link for you guys below. So if you guys want to shop and get some cards, you definitely can. Matt, any other words of wisdom that you want to add here?
I just wanted to acknowledge you for taking a risk, reaching out to Ian, and creating the space for great conversation. So thanks so much, Jeneth.
No, thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.